speakers and the participants of today's webinar titled Options India Can Take at the Present Stage for its Economic Development, organized by the Global University as a part of Speakers Series. Royal Global University has successfully organized around 50 webinars, housing different disciplines and domains within a span of 2 weeks and still waiting for more. This speaker series is being organized at the university and departmental level, are designed to provide insight into the current issues. Royal Global University is a leading university committed to provide unparalleled education to render holistic development of students and has been ranked #1 private university of Northeast India by Education World in a study conducted by the Center for Forecasting and Research, New Delhi. Dear participants, it gives me an immense pleasure to inform you that today we have a panel consisting of Professor Pulin B. Nayak, retired professor of economics, Delhi School of Economics, and Dr. R.B. Burman, member of State Institute of Transforming Assam, SITA, as our external speakers, and Professor Dr. S.P. Singh, Vice Chancellor, Royal Global University, and Dr. Samira Islam, Professor, Department of Economics, Royal Global University, as our internal speakers. A very warm welcome to all of you, sir, and ma'am also. Now, COVID-19, although is a pandemic, has created an immense impact on the global economy and India. According to the IMF, the COVID-19 pandemic will lead to global recession in 2020 that will be at least as severe as the downturn during the economic and financial crisis of 2008. Similarly, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development on March 9, 2020 estimated a shortfall of $2 trillion in the global income on account of COVID-19 crisis, with $220 billion lost to the developing countries. Now coming to our economy, Indian economy was already trading a slowdown even before the pandemic, and it is accepted that the situation will go down further. There's the negative part of this pandemic. But however, India can adapt to the changing environment and can stand on an advantageous position also. Accordingly, many economists are considering the pandemic as an opportunity for our country rather than a setback. This is a positive part of this pandemic. So we have organized this webinar on this particular topic, but we have two subtopics under this heading. And these two subtopics are, the first subtopic, it is about capitalism, present crisis and reform. And the second subtopic will be sustaining high economic growth and integrated approach for a knowledge economy. So we'll have a question answer round also after all the deliberations from our respective speakers. And I'd like to ask all the participants to put their question in the chat box. And I also request the participants to switch off their microphone and the video also. Now I'm going to start for the deliberations from our internal speakers first. To start with today's session, I would like to introduce our first speaker of the day, Professor Samira Islam. Professor Islam was the principal in charge of Capita Commerce College, former OSD of Women University Assam, and now professor in economics, Department of Economics, Royal Global University. Good morning, ma'am. Ma'am, we are waiting for your enlightened deliberation.
Good morning.
Over to you, ma'am. You are on screen now.
Good morning. Good morning, Jugal. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Perfect, ma'am.
A very good morning to everybody present. Good morning to the Honorable Chancellor, Honorable Vice Chancellor. A very good morning to distinguished invited speakers, Dr. R.B. Burman and Professor Pulin Nayak. We are very fortunate to have you with us. Good morning to the registrar, our deans, senior professors, and my colleagues. Basically, this topic was about options India can take at the present stage for its economic development. And as we know that because of the COVID-19, the Indian economy has gone for a toss. Today in the newspaper, we saw that in a single day, there was an increase of about 13,586 COVID-19 cases. So the scenario is not really good. And when we generally talk about economic development, we see so many optimistic signals. But right now, I don't know. I would just like to quote a few indicators which I picked up from the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy. In January 2019, India's growth rate was about 5.6%, but in January 2020, it has fallen to 3.1%, which means the growth was already down. And now the growth rate is expected to go down to 1.1%, or if not negative. So anyway, it doesn't sound very good, but if you go to other things also, like the UNDP's Human Development Report of 2019, India ranks 129 of the list of out of 189 countries, which is really very. I mean, you feel as though you're in a bad state. It's very dismal. But I don't know. Maybe policies will be put in place to turn this disadvantage into an advantage. And then again, can you hear me? A new report by the World Economic Forum, which was released recently. It's about the name of the report is Global Social Mobility Report 2020, Equality, Opportunity, and New Economic Imperatives. So I guess we must think about now opportunities and about equalities, about inclusive growth. And according to that report, very sad thing, Indians born in a low income family will take about 7 generations to even approach the country's mean income. And it says that some 220 million Indians are living on an expenditure of less than 32 rupees per day. And this is the rural poverty line for the poverty line for the rural India. If I am wrong, Professor Nayak and Dr. Borman sir will kindly correct me later on. Then what had happened was, although the coronavirus cases were detected on the first case was detected on 30th of January. Yeah, it was only on the 21st of March, and then 24th of March, I think the Prime Minister ordered a lockdown, and by this time, matters became very serious. All transport means of transport were ceased to be operating, and the laborers started walking back home. They all walked back home because there were no trains. Now, this is the time when we find that people who had no money in their pockets because they were living from one paycheck to the other paycheck, they decided that they would rather starve and die in their own villages than stay in an urban area where there was no backup for them, because there was no relief coming to them. Now, according to the same report which I had mentioned earlier about Global Social Mobility Index as prepared by World Economic Forum, the 5 indicators which we must take for economic growth are health, access to and quality of education, technology, work opportunities, wages and conditions, coverage of social protection, and inclusive intentions. So now, since we know that about almost 30% of our population, there are different figures quoted by the government and by CMI and other agencies, but we know there's a large section of the people who are below the poverty line, and the people who have all gone back to the own villages are adding to this dismal figure. We have to now think about how to bring about a change in the economy, and what strategies must be taken for economic growth, since this is a different scenario altogether. In the meantime, after 50 days of lockdown, the government had announced support for about 80 million Indians, but they ignored the fact that these migrants, these laborers, they did not have ration cards, they did not come under the PDS system, so they were left out of it. Now, again, I come to some other statistics which I have picked up from CMI data, which said that unemployment rate in India was 23.5% in April 2020, and when the lockdown lockdown was just started, so the unemployment rate really went up, But once it began to ease, we found that they said that the labor participation rate fell from, during the lockdown, the labor participation rate fell from 42.6% in the third week of March to 35.4% in the week ending 26 April. However, now with the easing of the lockdown, economic activities are being resumed, and the LPR, or the labor participation rate, has gone up to 40.4% in the first week of June, which is not too far from its pre-lockdown level of 42.7% of labor participation rate. Now, since unemployment is a major concern for us, we have to think that, and we know that most of the unemployment are unrecorded in the informal sector. We have to think of ways and means of bringing these. It has become a major concern for us, and two major concerns, major questions will be: what is the major cause of unemployment, and what we as individuals or business entities or society as a whole can do to solve the problem of unemployment. Although the government has announced a huge fiscal stimulus, it is unlikely that it will solve this problem of economic growth, solve the problem of giving employment to so many people. India needs to ensure inclusive growth with a policy of cooperative federalism or decentralization of governance in the true spirit with the public-private participation mode. And with these words, I end my thing, and I welcome our invited speakers to carry on from here. Thank you, Jugal.
Thank you, ma'am, for your pleasant and thoughtful deliberations. Yes, ma'am, we do agree that our position in HDI, Human Development Index, is not that good. We need inclusive growth and all to improve our positions and Human Development Index and all. So hope we will be able to overcome all these type of challenges over time. So now I'd like to request all the participants, if you have any questions, you can put your questions in the chat box. Now moving to our next deliberation. Now I take the opportunity to introduce you our next speaker, Professor Dr. S.P. Singh, Vice Chancellor, the Royal Global University. Having dynamic and enterprising personality, Professor S.P. Singh has more than 30 years of experience in teaching, research, academic administration in the institutions of repute across the nation. Prior to joining the Royal Global University as the Vice Chancellor, Professor Singh was the former Senior Vice President Academics of Amity Education Group and the founder Vice Chancellor of Amity University of Chhattisgarh, Raipur. With a background of geology, law, and strategic management, Professor Singh is much sought after speaker and a resource person for us. So, waiting for your enlightened deliberation. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jugal. Our esteemed speakers for the day, Professor Pulin B. Nayak, Professor Dr. R.B. Burman, Professor Khadaria, who is very, very dear and near to us, and he is very kind to participate in today's webinar. My esteemed colleague, Professor Sabira Islam, Madam, other senior professors of University of Royal Global University, and all my dear participants. First of all, let me start with this confession that Jugal, probably I'm not the speaker in any context. I'm basically was delivered to initiate the topic, and I can't claim myself to be a speaker on the topic which has been slotted today, because out of all the people who are going to speak today, I am the only one who is not from economics background. So I think I have no prudence to speak on the topic the way I'm eager to listen to the esteemed speakers. And the time slotted, if I am recall, is only 3 to 4 minutes for me, and it was 3 to 4 minutes for Dr. Islam also. So 3 to 4 minutes slotted to speaker is also injustice to the speaker. So I'm not a speaker in the context of time also. Anyway, so I just have 2-3 thoughts in my mind, and the way Jugal has introduced the topic and Dr. Islam has further elaborated upon it, and our concern as an Indian, as a citizen of this country, we are very, very, very concerned about everyone. First of all, we are concerned about the country's growth. And we know that countries' growth is directly linked with the growth of individuals. And if at all we are not going to grow the speed we have thought of to become superpower or economic power by 2030, what our ex-president of India, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, has said, I don't know which direction this pandemic will take us. However, saying this, I was reading today morning in the newspaper one article written by Professor S.S. Mantha, the ex-chairman of All India Council of Technical Education. I have just picked one statistics from there because I am good in statistics, but I am very susceptible or maybe sensitive about statistics because statistics is normally been quoted with respect to the individual psyche than to the reality. So I have my doubts about statistics because people show one side of the coin and they try to avoid the second side of it because of many reasons. I will not speak on that. But anyways, I just pick one statistics I will share with you. That is that 1% drop in GDP or 1% increase in GDP of this country leads to the growth of 7.5 million jobs. 7.5, and that is something which is very, very important if we are going to, because I am vice chancellor of an academic institution, my main concern is my student and their jobs, future jobs. And if at all India is not going to grow with the speed we were expecting, and it is going to be a very, very big downfall in the GDP, 3.1 in the month of January, and now it is going to be 1.1 or maybe negative, we exactly don't know. In that context, and when we have a other struggle going on with the China, where we have a lot of raw material support from China with respect to imports and what we are going to do with China. We are going to stop the imports. We are going to stop using the Chinese goods, and how that is also going to impact Indian economy. I'm very sure that will impact a few years at least. What is the road forward? So these are all there in my mind, and I have few ideas that what probably, I don't know, right or wrong, that economists can decide better. But probably we have to, as I always used to say, the World Bank has said long back, I remember 20 years back, and we are thinking of it, go back to roots. And fortunately, because of this COVID pandemic, many people have gone back to their home, gone back to the villages, gone back to their roots. Not only laborers, but also skilled people, also semi-skilled people, they have gone back to their villages. And now India has to think, in my opinion, because my roots into the Indian villages, I still go to my village frequently. And what foresee, I have discussed in other webinar also, the pressure on the cities and the pressure on industrial town can gradually be reduced, and the pressure should be, or maybe growth engine of the country should now be from cities and industrial towns towards the villages. The villages and the small towns should be the growth engine of this country in times to come, which as an economist, I don't know, but as a prudent, citizen of this country, which I see around, and many government have started working in that direction, in my opinion. They've started employing them through Manrega and all. That is a temporary phase, but they are also going to develop some kind of ecosystem, infrastructure, so that these skilled, semi-skilled people and labor force can be employed fruitfully for the growth of the nation, for the GDP of this country. We may not reach to the level of 3.5 or 5.5, but if at all we start working hard in this area, we will be saving our environment, we will be saving our city to growth of the cities exponentially, and also we will be able to have an inclusive growth, what Savera ma'am has said, or the cooperative federalism, where we have our citizens living in the villages and towns happily. So that is my point. Only one point I have said. Probably this is the only knowledge I have with respect to economics. I may be excused for that. And thank you very much, Jugal, for giving me time. And I'm very eager to listen from my esteemed speakers today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for your deliberation. So we also hope for the best. The government will come up with some better policies to overcome this financial crisis. Now, moving ahead, I take the opportunity to introduce you our first external speaker, Dr. R.B. Burman. Presently, Dr. Burman is member of SITA, State Institute of Transforming Assam, Government of Assam. Dr. Burman holds a master's degree in statistics and PhD in industrial economics. He was former executive director of the Reserve Bank of India. Dr. Burman was the chairman of National Statistical Commission, Government of India. He was also an advisor to the National Payment Corporation of India, NPCI. His contributions in the development of RTGS, NEFT, mobile payments, ATM, and other policies thereof are well known. Dr. Burman was the president of the Indian Econometric Society, vice president of the Indian Association of Research in National Income and Wealth, and patron of Indian Society on Statistics and Computer Applications. Today, Dr. Burman, sir, will speak on sustaining high economic growth and integrated approach for a knowledge economy. Sir, waiting for your enlightening deliberation. So over to you, sir.
Okay. Good morning to all the participants. First of all, let me thank the university, and I am also happy to know that university in a very short time stands the #1 rank. This is really a very good achievement. And I must thank Madam Savera Islam, whom I know for quite some time. When she approached me, I could not say her no. So this is how I am here. Now, the topic on which I am going to talk is sustaining high growth requires a different strategy and integrated approach for knowledge economy. I think since there is a very limited time, I hope that the slides that I have sent will be displayed, and then participant can see those slides. Maybe there are about 13, 14 slides, so even one slide can take not more than a minute. Now, see what are this is the first slide. So let us go to slide number 2. Slide number 2, you see the vision that we have set for ourselves is that by 2024-25, we should reach it. Our economy should have a size of 5 trillion. And if you see the graph 2019-20, this is from the budget document of this year, January. It was $2.9 trillion. So if we have to go there, we require a growth rate of 11.5%. If you look at the past, we never had a sustained growth of that kind of an order. But on the other hand, if you see the China from 1990 onwards till up to about 2010, almost 20 years, they have been growing at 10% or more. So earlier when we were talking about the growth of Asian tigers, people used to say that India is different because our population is huge. We have a huge problem of population. So we cannot compare ourselves with the Asian tigers. But China has demonstrated quite clearly that it is possible. The next question that comes out is that what is the past record? Go to the next slide. If you start from the recent period itself, you will find that our saving is decelerating, investment is decelerating, growth figures were high, but it has gone down. So the next issue that comes out is that based on this, if we have to maintain a growth of about 10% or more, we require an investment under the conventional setup of about 40% of GDP, which is almost impossible. So then the next question comes out is that how do we get at 11.5% as the growth target if we have to achieve? Now, if you look at the budget document, you will get an impression that it is pro-private sector initiative and the foreign investment that are likely to be the major thrust areas for achieving this kind of a growth in a market economy. But we do not have really a detailed exercise to really get to know as to how to go about it. That is number one. Number two is that even if we set the high target, what is the mechanism through which we are in a position to achieve that kind of a target? That is another question which we need to have a clear answer. Now, coming to the next slide, economic policy and data science. As you might have seen, my basic background is statistics. Though I did my PhD in economics from IIT Bombay, but it's in the core of my heart, I am still a data scientist or a statistician. Now, the question that comes out is that uh, keeping the economics in mind and marshalling the kind of a data, uh, what are the options that we have and how to go about, and that's what is the issue. Now we have a highly labor surplus economy. There is a scarcity of capital, and the issue is that how to make best use of human resources so that we can have an inclusive growth. Now, when we talk of inclusive growth with the kind of a saving and investment that we have, and if the productivity, the way in the past it was, if we have to maintain, we'll never be able to achieve that. So first thing is that we should be in a position to raise productivity. Second thing is that we should be in a position to be competitive in the global arena. Otherwise, we'll find it very difficult to sustain, because the cheap products from China or other countries will not be in a position to uh, oppose those kind of things. Now, when we talk about productivity and competitiveness, that comes out, is it at a macro level that we need to take action? But productivity, as I will tell later on, is basically a microeconomic kind of a thing. Even for competitiveness, this is basically, if you look at the microeconomics, competitiveness is basically a major part of the microeconomics. Now, what is basically required is that we need to build a paradigm which is in a position to combine the micro with the macro. And in today's world, it is possible to combine. And when we have huge data and the analysis of these data, such a huge data requires data science. Now, come to the next slide. That that is so planning and development. That is the next slide. India's main strength is its huge young population and vast market. There is a possibility to focus on untapped human and material resources for raising prospect for high growth and employment. But how? We also need to invest in research and development for innovation in technology for productivity and competitiveness. Market economy presumes trickle down for inclusive growth, which does not work. Planning process presumes government intervention for allocation of resources, but inefficiencies of government breeds corruption and second. A broad-based improvement of living standard requires inclusive growth, setting well-defined objectives. Can we have an integrated approach? So this is basically the question. Let us get into the next. Now, see, almost half of our population live in depend on agriculture. 2/3 of our population live in villages, and of the half population, some depend on agriculture partly, some depend on agriculture fully. If you compare the productivity of one crop that I have taken, that is the paddy, if you look at our productivity of paddy is almost why less than half that of the China. And even on world comparison, ours is much less. Even compared to Bangladesh, which is just near about Assam, the productivity of paddy is. So this only leaves a kind of thought that we need to, we have not been able to address the issue of productivity. And let me also tell you a few other things. The per hectare consumption of fertilizer in India is only about 160 kilogram, whereas in China it is 450 kilogram. And many of the developed countries, they are the land and population dependence are more or less similar kind of thing. Let me quote, USA contributes about 3% of GDP from agriculture, but only less than 2% of the population really depend on agriculture. In the world average, it is about 4.1% of the people who depend on agriculture, whereas in India, it is a high, about 50%, and share of agriculture in GDP is going down every year. Let us get to the next. It is the three pillars of inclusive growth. That's what I have talked. Maximizing economic opportunities, ensure minimum economic well-being, and ensure equal access to economic opportunities. And there are details below. Governance and institutions are very important, and that leads to inclusive growth, that leads to the poverty reduction. Coming to next, I gave you some idea about the importance of the micro. Let me quote here from Porter, who is a professor of Harvard University. It is very interesting and very important also. Developing countries again and again are tripped up by microeconomic failures. Countries can engineer spurts of growth through macroeconomic and financial reforms that bring floods of capital and cause the illusion of fundamentally improving their operations and strategies, and competition is moving to a higher level. However, growth will be snuffed out as jobs falls to materialize, wages stagnate, and return to investment prove disappointing. India needs the list of low-income countries. Here's the list of low-income countries with microeconomic capability that could be unlocked by microeconomic and political reforms. And I think this is a very loaded one. And as I proposed, how to integrate micro with the macro today's world. I think this is what I talk about, and this is what I will explain you briefly. See, the models must rest on micro behavior of individuals and structure of their mutual interactions. Now, when we divided economics into micro and macro, we have really not adhered to this kind of a thing. We look at macro differently, we look at micro differently. What happens is that the assumptions on which macro is built, I will tell in the end also, there are huge lot of problems on those assumptions. Those assumptions are basically unrealistic, and that's why we presume transmission channels which are rough, which do not always work. So capture the process of change as it actually happens through changing connections, networks, structures, and processes, which is a complex adaptive system. Now, for productivity, we know that it is production possibility frontier in the macroeconomics. If you translate it in the econometrics, it is called data envelopment analysis or frontier analysis. The graph that you see is the frontier here, and then it locates each and every farm into this kind of a graph. The B is the least efficient one, and I say efficient frontier. From there, it is a distance that is shown. D is a little more efficient, but still not efficient. C is definitely much more efficient. So this is the kind of a measure with the micro data. It is possible, and we can, in fact, in today's world, we can tell each and every farm that as compared to the best production possibility, who stands here. And this creates a knowledge, and that gives him an opportunity to try to work to come to increase the productivity. That's what is very important. And we are in a position to put all these data to the appropriate people through kind of a mobile phone. Just tell them that this is what is where you stand vis-a-vis the other. Now, the next question comes about the pricing. you see, this is where consumer and producer surplus issue comes up. If you look at next slide, that if you put the government control, what happens is that you lose on the producer surplus parts of it, though consumer surplus increases, but in the process there is also a deadweight loss. So yeah, so the next question that comes out is that we want that both producer and consumer should be winners, not one winner, another loser. So we should be in a position to see the price data so that this is maintained, and if not, we should be in a position to act in the market. Now, this is how we organize the data today. What I call is a special big data platform. So data comes from next one. Data comes from various sources. It is captured and it is taken to the staging area. From staging area, it goes to what we call is a multi-dimensional view. We call data warehouse, and on the top we have what is called the geocoding engine. So if we have each and every data element geocoded, we are in a position to go up to that level. That means, if possible, we can go even up to the level of a village. In fact, even if the household code is there, we can go even up to the level of a household. And this can all be seen, analyzed, as I have shown you the right hand side. And then what we need is that sectoral nexus to be created, which we have as a part of the macroeconomics, but with the micro data available, we can have drill down, drill up, drill across to see the entire picture, including the distribution. So that's what is very important. The 5 questions that I like to ask: a farmer in a village should know what is the best possible yield per acre in his area. How different is it from the India based, global based, and why? These gap analysis inform him as to how to improve productivity. In effect, a manufacturer should know what is the best combination of inputs and outputs for the item he is producing, and what can be done to reduce the gap with the best. A financier should know what is the risk of lending and how to price the risk, compete in the market with products to adjust market demand. Come next slide. So we are not living into this slide. Get further down.
So, Dr.
Slides.
Burman, sir,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt you, sir. Time is very constrained for us. So,
yeah, that's right. So I have only the conclusion slide.
okay,
So
sir.
let me wrap it up. The mainstream economics have the conviction that present macroeconomic management can ensure both growth and stability. The paradigm for such a belief is based on unrealistic assumptions about the reality. Basically, what I want to say is that income is highly skewed, consumption is skewed, asset distribution is skewed, but in the macroeconomics, because we aggregate them, we assume them to be symmetric. We need micro-macro linkage to explain real sector, financial sector, and fiscal sector nexus. The planning process should be based on such bottom-up integrated approach, and the monitoring and evaluation of progress should be transparent and robust. This will keep the machinery well-oiled for sustained high inclusive growth and balanced development. So this was my last slide. Thank you. Yeah, I have done.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you for enlightening us with your deliberation. So hope that India will be able to reap all the advantages of demographic dividend in future with proper policies and all. Now, moving to our next speaker, I have the privilege here and the honor to introduce our next panelist, Professor Pulin B. Nayak, former professor of economics, Delhi School of Economics. He holds a master's degree in economics from Delhi School of Economics and his PhD from University of Rochester, New York. He has joined the Faculty of Economics Department at the Delhi School of Economics in 1978 as reader in economics and became professor in 1996. He was the Dean of Social Sciences in Delhi School of Economics in 2000 and Director of Delhi School of Economics from 2005 to 2008. During 2013 and 14, he was a member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, and his areas of research have been public economics, economic theories, and economic development. And he has published widely in the areas of public finance and economic development. Today, Nayak Sir will speak on the second subtopic of this webinar, capitalism, present crisis, and reform. Sir, waiting for your enlightening deliberations. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Perfect. Sir.
Everyone can hear me. Okay. So friends, thank you, Mr. Jugal Bhattacharya, for those very kind remarks, initial remarks. Let me also begin by thanking first Dr. Swabera Islam, who contacted me a few days back, and then later on there was contact with Dr. Ms. Pahi Bhagwati also. I'd like to thank Pahi, and certainly I would like to thank Dr. Swabera Islam for inviting me. And while about it, let me also thank the Vice Chancellor, Dr. S.P. Singh, and I'm happy to see my old friend Binod Khadria, and also first time I'm meeting Dr. R.B. Burman, and I was listening intently to his deliberations and his delivery. Now, I understand I have about 20 minutes. You please tell me how much time you have, and I'll strictly do the. You tell me, you give me the time.
Yes, sir. 15 to 20 minutes, sir, exactly.
15 to 20 minutes. You can be 100% sure that I will not exceed this. That's for sure. And so let me begin. You know, the topic, when I was asked about what I might like to speak on, I thought of the different possible areas, and I chose this: capitalism, present crises, and reforms. As it happens, this is just going to be a 15-minute presentation. So I would suggest to the honorable sort of friends here and many others who are watching, listening to this, I have a paper in the Economic and Political Weekly on this particular topic, precisely this topic, 25th April 2020, about a month and a half back, precisely on this topic. This is a topic on which I gave a presidential address in the Gujarat Economic Association meeting. They were having a 50 years completion this January in 2020. And this is the topic I spoke on, and later on it has come out in the Economic and Political Weekly. Now, to begin at the beginning, before I come to the topic, let me also touch on issues that we are facing right now in India in the context of the COVID crisis. The context is one where in the last 2.5 months, we are stuck with a very severe problem that the economy is facing. The country was on a lockdown starting 24th of March. It has led to a complete stoppage of activities, very many activities in the industry sector, in the services sector. Of the three major sectors, I think agriculture is possibly the only area where the hurt has been the least. But you know, agriculture accounts for about something like 13, 14 or 15% of GDP, maximum about 15% of GDP. I'm talking about the all India picture. So the balance is coming from industry and services. And now if you look at services, you know, the entire restaurant industry all over the country under a lockdown. The entire hotel industry under a lockdown, tourism under a lockdown, transport, bus transport, rail transport, air transport under a lockdown. And you can imagine the number of individuals who are dependent on these activities. A restaurant means that not only is there a proprietor, he hires a cook, there are waiters and so forth and so on. There's a chain. The entire chain of employment is gone. Likewise for the hotel industry. not only is there a proprietor, but the proprietor has his managers, and there's a supporting staff, and then there are people who are attending to the rooms, there are cleaners and so forth. So the entire production and employment activity has dwindled in the last 2.5 months. So I want to make just one or two comments about this. The manner in which the lockdown was put in on the 24th of March, I personally have my strong reservations about the way it was done. Because at the time that the Prime Minister announced this, and he gave only 4 hours, you remember, for the lockdown to start. Now, obviously, the Prime Minister in his 24th March speech, with all due respect to the Prime Minister, of course, there was no inkling of the idea that there could be some people who might think in terms of suddenly struck with no job starting the following morning. And you see, we have a country where 85 to 90% of the population is the informal sector. People earn in one day, and in the evening they get some money, 200, 300, 400, 500 rupees. They spend that money to purchase their ration, etc. They spend the night and so forth. If it is a stoppage of work for 2, 3, 4, or 5 days, fine, they'll be able to manage. But if you're going to have a stoppage for 10 days, 15 days, and as it happens, more than 2 months, what do you expect these people to do? There are people who have gone from Assam to Delhi to Surat to Bangalore and so forth. There are people, I'm from the state of Orissa. From Orissa, a lot of workers in Surat and in Kerala, in Karnataka and so forth, and Delhi as well. What do? They take a place on rent, and if they do not earn the following day, the next day, the next day, and next day, there's no money in their hands. They have to go back to their hometowns because that is the only place they can have some sort of a living. And look at the way we treated this activity. First of all, there was a complete lack of understanding of what our country is. More than 10 crores of people. It was a stunning sort of sight. Within a day of the Prime Minister's address, there are these people on the roads walking, and with no mode of transport, they begin to start walking. Young man, wife, small children, they're walking on the roads. And look at the kind of public policy we brought in. We said that after the second or the third day, we told that they cannot use the highways. If you see people on the highways, start beating them. That was the public policy we had. So the police went after people, they started beating them. These people left the highways, they went into the fields. Some went onto the rail tracks. Many of them died. We know that. So I don't want to say all these. It is a very sad and tragic situation we have allowed ourselves to be in. If India thinks that we are one of the topmost countries and country which has made it, sorry, I mean, this is not a topmost country of the world sort of looks at its own people. More than 10 crore of people going back to their villages, and we treat them in this way. So this is a situation of a complete breakdown of the social contract. Please try to understand. And I'm underlining this. We should not be looking at this problem as a pure only economistic problem. It is a social problem. It is a political problem. It is a human problem. And completely sort of destroyed any sort of relationship that labor had with the employers and with the government. It's a breakdown of social contract. Many of the people who are in their villages now in Orissa and Bihar, in Uttar Pradesh, they don't want to go back to Surat and Delhi and so forth because they say that mere ko agar 10-20 रुपए मिल जाता है in the village, that is better than earning about 80 rupees or 100 rupees in Surat or Delhi. So that is the kind of situation. Now let me come to my topic. My topic is capitalism with its present crises and reforms, and a long sort of set of ideas I'm trying to compress within 5 to 10 minutes. And I can assure you, I've looked at my watch. I'm not going to speak to you a minute beyond 12:30. I started at about 12:15, a little before that. 12:30, I'll finish. So what I want to say is the following. Today we look at the entire world, and you look at what kind of economic system prevails in the world at large. And there's only one answer. It is capitalism. It is capitalism because when we had communism or some form of socialism, the Russians started it in the year 1917. There was the USSR, Eastern European countries were very much in the thing. China came in the year 1949. There was a socialist, communist kind of presence, but by the late 1980s, the Soviet Union had its internal contradictions. It broke down, and with the fall of the Berlin Wall, the Soviet Union today is composed of a whole lot of countries. Russia, in Russia, you have a kind of capitalism. Of course, it's not the American kind of capitalism, but a degree of market mechanism is to be seen in Russia. Of course, the Communist Party plays a very major role. It's not the kind of democracy that we have, but they do have the market mechanism in a substantial way. The other major country, China. Well, what about China? Well, China too, the market mechanism today accounts for a whole major manner in which their economic activity is organized. The market mechanism is very important, but the Chinese economy continues to be a one-party political structure. Within a one-party political structure, they have found it advantageous to have the market mechanism. And in the Chinese case, you know, after 1949, it was Chairman Mao whose word was the final word, and it continued the Cultural Revolution and so forth and so on. But after Mao's death in the 70s, late 1970s, let's look at the year 1979. In the year 1979, in fact, if you look at China and India in the year 1979-80, it is very interesting. China and India, in terms of per capita income, were roughly around the same in the year 1979-80. The Maoist regime had just been over, and Mao was dead, and the country was taken over by Deng Xiaoping. You might recall Deng Xiaoping. So he was the leader, and he thought that China, we cannot afford to have China continuing in the old style, and let the market mechanism start. From the year 1980, China started moving at something like 9, 10 or 11% growth rate from 1980 for about 30 years, beyond 2010. In the Indian case, well, after 1980, our growth rate also increased, but not quite as dramatically as the Chinese growth rate. So in the year 1980, China and India roughly the same, but China's growth rate of 10% sustained over more than 30 years has put China at a fantastically higher position vis-a-vis India. India's per capita income right now, let me tell you, we are all economists, it's roughly about $2,200 per annum, per person, okay? The US, just by way of a sort of, just to fix ideas, US is around 65,000 per person per annum, US. India is around $2,200. What is China? Right now, China is somewhere around 9,000 to 10,000. They are 4 times us in the year 2020. But remember, India and China were roughly at the same starting point around 1980. So India has a long way to go. Of course, we have a long way to go when we compare ourselves to the USA. But I'm not even comparing ourselves to the USA. I don't think countries should be aspiring to go to that kind of a per capita income. We should not. It is wasteful, and I'm coming to my precise ideas on this. We should not, no country should try to make its per capita income that high. It's wrong. It's bad on the environment, on the ecology. But the Chinese, maybe India can think in terms of moving up, because 2,200 has to be improved. China has 4 times, and we can think in terms of moving somewhere around there. But I now come to the points that I have. Capitalism is the unassailable system today across the world, Western Europe, North America, India also, we have a form of capitalism. And the market mechanism is the principal thing for us. But there are 2 major problems about capitalism. And the 2 major problems that I look at, there are very many other ways of looking at capitalism, but the 2 critical issues. Number 1, what capitalism does to the environment and ecology. by its very nature, capitalism is unmindful. Capitalism goes after the growth rate. And in trying to go for the growth rate, capitalism is unmindful of what happens to nature. And if you look at what the world was at the start of the Industrial Revolution, okay, say if you start around 1750 or thereabouts, the kind of natural sort of forests and the water and so forth that was there in Britain, in Europe, in India at that time, and how it slowly changed. We come to the 18th century, we come through the 19th century, extensive deforestation happens. We now come to the 20th century. And even at the beginning of the 20th century, deforestation, etc., but the process is magnified and minerals extracted from Mother Earth and so forth. Extensive sort of devastation of ecology. In India today, we do not have a single river, not a single river which is clean. All rivers are polluted, and very badly, very badly. Most forest areas are under heavy pressure, including the Himalayan forest, the entire range. So this is a very major issue, number one. And number two, capitalism has a serious issue with the problem of inequality. It is in the very nature of capitalism that if you have the capitalist growth, inequalities will sharpen. In recent years, two major books have been written by a person by the name Thomas Piketty, Frenchman. 2013, he had the book Capitalism in the 21st Century. And just last week in India, his latest book, Capital and Ideology, has come into the market. About 10 days back, I had a review of the book in Sunday Express. Anyone who gets Sunday Express or Indian Express, you can just Google my name and the review of Capital and Ideology, Thomas Piketty. It's a fantastic, Piketty's, these two books have been, each book has been 1,000 pages plus. Capital and Ideology, the second book which has just come out, it is 1,100 pages. There's a lot of consideration of the Indian situation, essentially, and of course, the consideration of Western Europe, North America, and so forth. And Piketty is trying to see how capitalism can be trimmed, how it can be controlled. And in the Piketty kind of idea, in terms of controlling capitalism, by having an extensive notion of socialism, which is empowered by the working class. Piketty is not arguing for the Marxian kind of revolution. He's against the revolution, against bloodshed. But a greater degree of participative socialism is what he's talking about. I have just 2 minutes, 1 or 2 minutes. What I want to say is that this idea of Piketty was very attractive to me, and I talked about that in my review in the Sunday Express. Please do have a look if you have the chance. But what I want to say is the following. This notion of a critique of capitalism is to be found in some of the core thinking of some of our own great national thinkers and leaders. And I'm taking one major name, Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhiji, in the year 1909, he had written Hind Swaraj. In that Hind Swaraj, Gandhiji had a particular way of looking at the problem that India has in terms of its economy and polity. Essentially, Gandhi was talking about an economic management where everyone will get employment, where we will not have too big industries. He was for the small scale industry. Gandhiji was for the village industries. And I think some of the previous speakers, including the Vice Chancellor, talked about the importance of going back to the villages and having our industrial hubs in the village or the small town. These are in consonance with the kind of ideas that Gandhiji propagated in 1909. We think of Nehru. Nehru is one of the greatest modernizers. Unfortunately, in current times in India, Nehru is being seen to be the villain for all problems in the country. I'm sorry, I don't agree there. Nehru is the person who allowed me to study in Delhi University for monthly fees of 18 rupees per month in Delhi University. Today also in Delhi University, the fee, monthly fees is 18 rupees. For computers and so on, you have to pay something extra. The IITs, IIMs, these are all Nehruvian ideas. All India Institute of Medical Sciences, these are ideas that were thought of very carefully by Nehru. Please, we should pay much greater respect. Nehru had his faults, no doubt, but it is not this. We have to understand the entire picture, the manner in which Nehru thought of planning. And I'll end by saying that we need to focus on two major issues of education and health in a very important way. And the state has to stand firm and take full charge. On health, you'll be surprised and shocked if I tell you public expenditure on health as a fraction of GDP in India is 1.3%. It is shockingly low. China has more than 3%. Western Europe between 8 to 10%. 8 to 10%. India must increase. You know, in this COVID problem, which are the hospitals which are giving treatment to the people who are COVID patients? Sorry, not the private hospitals. They are top end. वहां पे आप जाते हैं 50,000 रुपए or 1 lakh per day you have to spend. Those are the private hospitals. The big groups, Apollo Group, this group, that group, and so on. They are not the people who are looking after your poor and the unfortunate COVID patients. Again, the pressure is on the public hospitals. So please, we have to reorient. This idea of bringing an insurance into the health and education sector is wrong. Health sector is wrong. We have to have strong presence of the government, increase the government expenditure on, this is very much a Nehruvian kind of idea. And rather than belittling Nehru's ideas and suggestions, we should own them and try to work on them. So thank you very much. I think I have exceeded by 1 or 2 minutes. Thank you.
Yes, always no problem with that, sir. So actually time is our constraint. Otherwise, it was very much mesmerizing listening to you, sir. So thank you, sir, for your deliberation. And you have highlighted about the evils of capitalism. Then also you have highlighted what could be the probable reform policies for all these capitalist economies. Thank you very much, sir. Now we are moving towards the question answer round. So we have lots of questions in the chat box. So some questions are very similar. So I'm going to club all these questions. And first questions, I would like to pick up from the topic.
Mr. Jugal, if I may give you an idea, Mr. Jugal, I can give you a suggestion. What you might do is that you can I give the suggestion, please?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, the suggestion is this. You collect all the questions, there may be 4, 8, 10, 12 questions. Collect all the questions, and then the questions may be taken up by the speakers, you know, Dr. Burman or Professor S.P. Singh or Subera Madam or myself. Okay, collect all the questions first, and then we can deal with the questions. You can allot 2 minutes, 3 minutes, or 4 minutes to each one of us.
Exactly. I have already collected the questions and we have already clubbed with it. We have a team member here. So everyone is helping me to club the questions already. So we can start with the first question. This is on the subtopic actually on knowledge economy. So I'd like to forward this question to our honorable speaker, Dr. R.B. Burma. Question goes like this. Why does not government impose GST on education in high-end schools in India? The tax money can be used to develop education infrastructure for underprivileged children.
Yeah, you go. Please run all the questions so that is better.
So this
That's
is the
what
first,
Professor Nayak suggested.
Yes, sir. This is the first question, sir.
So you run through all the questions. We will note down. I've got a pen and paper. I'll note down the questions directed to me and so on. And then we'll just answer. That'll be easier. This is just an advice. This works much simpler, easier.
Okay, so the first question goes like this. Why does not government impose GST on education?
No, you already said the first question. Go to the second, third, fourth.
Yes, the second question is, with a population of 3% of India, Canada has already with the same number of persons engaged in R&D as India and 10 times the number of patents. Do you think India is not spending enough on R&D, or it is a matter of quality research?
Is it addressed to somebody? Just say that.
It is about knowledge economy. So both
okay,
of you.
So addressed to Dr.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Barman.
Third
Yes.
question.
Yeah.
India's position in HDI is not satisfactory. Can India sustain its high growth based on pillars of knowledge economy?
Dr. Barman.
Yeah.
And next question, it is about capitalism. With increasing dematerialization of economies of the West, do you think that Indian economy stand in the context capitalism without capital?
Okay. Question for me. Yeah. Yeah.
Next question, most capitalists do not know how to divide the economic profit, and most socialists do not know how to grow it well. Do you think that people from different ideological inclinations will work together to re-engineer the system that divide the pie and grow well also?
Mm-hmm.
And the third question for this capitalism topic, Government of India has already announced its financial packages. I have clubbed questions. Too many participants have asked questions relating to this particular one. Do you think that India will be able to overcome this crisis created by the pandemic with these financial packages declared by the Government of India?
Yeah. Okay.
So these are the questions, sir.
Yeah. Good. Thank you. Yeah. So I think Dr. Barman can answer, and then I can answer as you please. Yeah.
That's fine. I think let me club all the three questions together. I think on GST, R&D, FDI, and that. Now, GST is a part. I think I leave it to Professor Nayak because I don't really closely follow the GST part. Now, coming to R&D and the knowledge economy. Basically, why I say knowledge economy. If you have to kind of a for even agriculture, if you have to do something, it all depends on how a farmer is knowledgeable. Now the question that comes out is that when we have to develop as a country and grow much faster, our people must know that what are the possibilities and what are the options for them. Now, what we read and what we get to know are much more of a general kind, not specific to particular person or particular area. But in today's world, it is possible to get all the knowledge together and disseminate this knowledge among the relevant kind of people so that these people are in a position to take decision and knowledge-based decision, which will be much better. So that's why what is important is that we need to get the data, we need to know the reality, and based on the reality, we should also be in a position to know what are the possible options, and based on these options, we should be in a position to act upon it. Next question is regarding the R&D part of it. Yeah, we have been, as Professor Nayak said, that from the beginning, Nehru, I think while laying the foundation of the country, I think every aspect was given importance. We have CSIR, Council of Scientific and Industrial Research. They have been doing research in the forefront of the area. But look at the many other countries where even the private sector comes up in a big way into R&D work. Now, if you look at India, you see over the years through fiscal incentives, government has given a lot of incentive for R&D, but somehow or other, I think our expenditure on R&D as a percentage of GDP is less than 1%. And that work has not really picked up. I think at this stage, I'll stop here.
Now, can Vijay ask? Yes, sir.
Yes. Shall I
Yes, sir.
answer? Shall I
Yes,
answer
sir.
the questions put to me? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now I'll begin with something on GST, which Dr. Barman requested me to sort of briefly comment on. The question was directed to him, but the way I'll say just one or two words about it. You know, the idea of the GST, the way I understand GST, you know, the idea originally as some of you, there are economists, you will know that this is an idea that was very strongly propagated by Dr. Raja Chalaya, the late Dr. Raja Chalaya. He was possibly the most well-known taxation expert in the country, most well-known taxation expert in the country. And I had the good fortune of knowing him over a long span of time. He was immersed in the issue of government finances, government expenditure, taxation, and so forth. Somewhere around the late 1980s and early 1990s, Dr. Raja Chalaya thought of this idea that India, which is in its various states, there's a federal setup. He thought that even though we have a federal setup, we must have the notion of a unified market. And so that's why Professor Chalaya thought that we should have, the chief principal taxation for each state, as you know, is a state sales tax, right? That is the principle. Of course, all states have about 15 or 20 major taxes, motor vehicle tax, taxation on liquor, and so forth and so on. But the principal tax for each state is a state sales tax, as we all know. Now, but different states have different sales taxes. West Bengal will have, Assam, Meghalaya will have, Orissa will have, and so on. And what Professor Chalaya was thinking was that we should have something like a unified commodity tax system. And he thought of the idea of the GST, where the states will not individually charge sales taxes. Taxes will be collected. And this will have great advantage because, there used to be problem of goods moving from one state to another, and they were motor vehicles would have to be stopped and so on, octroi and so forth. And in order to enhance efficiency, the idea was that we should have a, commodity tax system that would be more general for the country at large. And the GST idea was started. Now, but the GST idea, the major real difficulty that we see in the GST is that in allowing the GST, states have lost their, shall we say, authority over the most important tax source that they had, which was the sales tax system. It has been given up to the GST Council, okay, Goods and Services Tax Council, and sales tax. Center collects it, and as per a certain principle of division suggested by the Finance Commission and so forth, the taxes are distributed to the various states. Now, the problem right now is that states are short of funds with this COVID crisis. The center is supposed to give certain GST amounts to Assam, West Bengal, Orissa, and so on. The amount is not coming. The federal structure that we have, which earlier used to have a system where the states would collect the sales tax for themselves, that is no longer the case. Money has been collected by the GST Council, and the amount of GST which has to be transferred back to Bihar, Maharashtra, Orissa, that is not coming. The center has its own difficulties, and it is being used as a political tool to control the activities of the state. So this is, in my understanding, one of the principal problems of GST, and it has to be sorted out in the times to come. And also, the collection on GST has not been as buoyant as it was expected to be. The GST collection has also not been particularly buoyant. So something has happened to my anyway, I can continue. Now I come to the three questions that were. You can hear me, friends? You can hear me?
Yes,
Jugal,
we
can
can.
you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah. So I have three questions to attend to, and very briefly. The first question had to do with capitalism without capital. And let me answer very briefly. Capitalism without capital, that was the first question. My immediate answer, capitalism has to be with capital. Capital is the core. Of course, labor is very important too, but capitalism without capital please do not go with these sort of slogans, etc. Some people may give it as a nice book title. Capitalism necessarily has to be with capital. Okay. Second question had to do with about capitalism and socialism. You know, this is the oldest issue of ideology that social scientists have had to grapple with, and we are still grappling with it. We are still trying to understand. Capitalism, and you could say, in some sense, Adam Smith was the father of capitalism, who will do their sort of best thing, and it will be, the end result will be a very, very harmonious end result for everyone. That is the key message of the Wealth of Nations. Now, but the consequences of this led to the, you know, as the Industrial Revolution started, inequalities were sharpened, and rich come up and the extremely poor come up. You know, by the 1850s, 1840s, in Britain, the quality of life of the bottom sections of the population was extremely poor, extremely poor. In urban London, Charles Dickens was writing about London in the 1840s. It was a very poor picture of the bottom sections of the population. They toiled hard. The earnings was very little, but at the same time, they were the very rich people who were the capitalists. Because he was so revolutionary in his ideas, he was thrown out from his own country, Germany, Russia. He came to France, he was thrown out of France, and the only country that would accept him was England. He was in London, he worked in the British Museum till his death, 1883. And what he saw in London was an extremely unequal kind of society that Industrial Revolution was bringing about. So he thought that the only way this system can go is when the workers take power into their own hands and get rid of the capitalists. Now, the nature of economics is such that capitalists will not leave on their own. They have to be thrown out. And Marx was not really a person who wanted blood for its own sake. He thought that a revolution was the only way the capitalists can be thrown out. And of course, he died in 1883. 1917, the first country that really had an end of capitalism, or a kind of feudalism actually, was in don't have people producing and having the same kind of incentive structure that capitalists have. That is true. But capitalism necessarily leads to this problem of inequality. It leads to the problem of devastation of the ecology, which socialism will not have. Under a socialist regime, you will be able to control what is the extent of devastation that you bring about to your ecology. And you can ensure that, and this is a long issue. I can talk for a long time on this particular issue. And what I want to say is that under socialism, income distribution can be much more controlled. That is the great advantage of socialism. And it's also understood by Pandit Nehru, who was a Fabian. So socialism cannot be thrown out, because socialism is necessary to have a more equitable kind of setting for all of us. Last question, financial packages in the current situation. Yes, John Maynard Keynes, when it was the Great Depression in 1989, and what did he suggest? He gave the idea that people should be given cash so that effective demand can be increased. In India today, we have more than 10 crore workers who have come back to their villages. They need money. Unke paas kuch paisa nahi hai abhi. They don't have any money. You need to give 100 rupee, 200, 500 rupee or 1000 rupees into their hands. That is not happening, unfortunately. The government is talking about many schemes, 20 lakh crores of money is being spent, 10% of GDP. But how many people have got a 100 rupee note in their hands? You tell me. You are a very learned being here, how many people, working class people, who are carpenters or who are cobblers, etc. How many of these people who did not have worked for 2 months or 3 months, no money in their hands, इनमें से कितने लोगों को 500 रुपए 1000 रुपए पॉकेट हाथ में मिले हैं? You just tell me. If nobody has got any money, then how can you then have a system where you can expect GDP to come back? So there are well-known schemes, there are well-known fiscal ways in which you can turn around the situation. But the present government doesn't seem to be very serious about looking at these suggestions. And I think we as economists and social scientists, we should try to do our bit, and we should tell the government that this is the time when they have to be liberal in their spending for the bottom 30, 40 or 50% of the population. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I've concluded.
Thank you for addressing all the questions. Thank you, Varman sir, also. So I have to say sorry to all the participants. We could not pick up all the questions due to constraint of times. So now, at last, we want to see no workers on the road, nobody dying out of starvation, everybody getting job and shelter, potable drinking water, all amenities, all farmers are smiling, and nobody committing suicide, etc. Definitely, the day will come and we'll be able to overcome all the crises created by this pandemic. Thank you, respected speaker, for joining us, and participants also. Once again, thank you. Stay safe. Have a good day. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, both the speakers.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.